I am Amanda, 30 years old, and a lawyer who recently lost my beloved grandmother. She left me her family home in her will, which became my sanctuary after her funeral. I found comfort living in the space she once filled with love. One peaceful morning, aggressive knocking disrupted my coffee ritual. Opening the door, I found my father and stepmother wearing smug expressions. "This house is mine now," my father declared, while my stepmother smirked, "Move out." If you are watching this and have ever had family, try to steal what is rightfully yours, drop a comment below and subscribe. This story might help you more than you think. My grandmother was not just family. She was my rock, my foundation. She practically raised me after my father walked out when I was only 7 years old. I still remember that day vividly. He packed a single suitcase, avoided eye contact, and mumbled something about needing to find himself. No goodbye hug, no explanation. A child could understand just the sound of the door closing behind him. My mother had passed away during childbirth, so when he left, Grandma Martha stepped in without hesitation. Growing up without my father was a mixture of confusion and abandonment. Kids at school would talk about their weekend plans with their dads, while I made up stories about mine being on important business trips. Grandma Martha never spoke ill of him, but she made sure I knew that his absence was his choice, not my fault. "Some people are not ready for the responsibility of nurturing another soul," she would say while braiding my hair before school. Our modest 2-story home on Maple Street became my entire world. The wooden porch swing where Grandma taught me to read. The kitchen with its sunshine yellow walls, where I learned to bake her famous apple pie. The small garden in the back where she showed me how snapdragons could talk if you squeezed them right. Every corner of that house held memories of her quiet strength and unwavering support. When I struggled with math homework, she sat with me until midnight, both of us determined to understand fractions. When I came home crying because I was not invited to a birthday party, she declared it a special day, and we made our own celebration cake. When I received my college acceptance letter, she framed it and hung it in the hallway, telling everyone who visited about her granddaughter, the future attorney. "Law school was her idea. You always stand up for what is right, Amanda. You should be a lawyer," she said after I defended a neighborhood kid who was wrongly accused of breaking a window. Her retirement savings helped with my first year of tuition, but I worked 2 jobs to cover the rest, determined not to burden her finances. Nights studying until my eyes burned. Weekends serving coffee instead of socializing, and holidays spent interning at firms instead of relaxing. Every sacrifice felt worthwhile when I called her after passing the bar exam and heard her proud voice saying, "I always knew you would." My father reappeared in our lives 5 years ago with a new wife, Heather. She was 20 years his junior, with perfectly highlighted hair and an air of entitlement that filled a room before she did. Their first visit to Grandma's house was clearly not a family reunion, but a financial reconnaissance mission. Dad praised the good bones of the house while Heather commented on how much potential it had with the right renovations. Grandma's face remained pleasant but unreadable as she served them tea in her best china cups. After that visit came the phone calls. Dad suddenly needed money for business ventures, medical bills, or other emergencies. Grandma listened patiently each time before gently declining. "I have limited resources that need to last me through my golden years," she would explain. His calls became less frequent after each rejection. When Grandma's health began failing 2 years ago, I moved back to help care for her. My law firm allowed me to work remotely 3 days a week, and I spent the other 2 in the office, an hour commute each way. The schedule was grueling, but watching her grow weaker made every minute with her precious. I administered medications, drove her to doctor appointments, and read to her when her vision became too blurry for her beloved mystery novels. In her final months, we had many deep conversations during the quiet hours of night when pain kept her awake. She spoke about her life, her few regrets, and her hopes for my future. "This house has sheltered 4 generations of our family," she told me one evening. "It should continue to shelter those who respect its history." I thought she was just reminiscing, but she was preparing me. The will reading 2 months after her funeral was straightforward. Grandma had updated her will just 6 months before her passing, leaving the house to me along with her modest savings. My father sat stunned as the lawyer read the documents while Heather's face transformed from expectant to furious. "There must be some mistake," Dad interrupted. "As her son, I should inherit the property." The lawyer patiently explained that the will was legally binding and clearly expressed Martha's wishes. Dad stormed out, Heather trailing behind after giving me a look that could freeze water. Moving into the house permanently felt both comforting and painful. Every room echoed with Grandma's absence, yet somehow still held her presence. I kept most of her furniture, finding solace in the worn armchair, where she knitted countless scarves, and the dining table where we shared thousands of meals. Her collection of blue glass bottles still caught the morning light on the kitchen windowsill, creating dancing patterns on the wall that made me feel she was still there, moving through her daily routine. The house needed work. The roof leaked in one corner, the water heater was temperamental at best, and the porch steps creaked dangerously. But it was home, my home, the only stable place I had ever known, legally left to me by the woman who had given me everything. I never imagined I would have to fight to keep it. The morning my father and stepmother arrived unannounced, I had been enjoying a rare day off. Saturday had dawned clear and cool, perfect for the garden planning I had been putting off. Grandma's flower beds needed attention after a winter of neglect. I was sketching possible layouts at the kitchen table when the pounding on the front door began. 3 sharp knocks, then silence, then 3 more impatient and demanding. Opening the door revealed my father in an expensive button-down shirt I had never seen before, and Heather in a cream pantsuit that probably cost more than my monthly student loan payment. Neither smiled in greeting. "We need to talk," Dad said, pushing past me into the hallway without waiting for an invitation. Heather followed her designer heels, clicking on the hardwood floors Grandma had lovingly polished every spring. "Nice of you to visit," I said, closing the door behind them. "Can I offer you some coffee?" "We are not here for pleasantries," Heather replied, surveying the living room with barely concealed disdain. "This place really has gone downhill. Martha would be disappointed." My father positioned himself in the center of the room, feet planted wide as if staking territory. "Amanda, we have come to discuss the house situation. There has been a misunderstanding that needs correction." "What misunderstanding?" I asked, crossing my arms defensively. "This house belongs to me," he stated flatly. "I am Martha's next of kin. A child outranks a grandchild in inheritance law." Heather nodded emphatically. "Your father has the legal right to his mother's property. We have been patient, allowing you time to grieve and make arrangements, but we need to move forward now." The confidence in their assertions momentarily made me doubt myself. Had there been some legal technicality I missed? Some clause in the will I had overlooked? My heart pounded as Dad pulled a folded document from his pocket and thrust it toward me. "This confirms my ownership," he said. "As you can see, it is all legally binding." I took the paper with trembling fingers. The document looked official at first glance with formal language and what appeared to be notary stamps. But as I scanned it, inconsistencies jumped out. Dates were wrong. Terminology was imprecise. And most tellingly, my grandmother's signature looked nothing like her distinctive handwriting. "This is not a valid document," I said, my lawyer mind now fully engaged. "Where did you get this?" "A legal professional prepared it for me, Dad," replied vaguely. "The point is, I am taking possession of the property effective immediately." Heather walked to the mantelpiece, running her finger along it and examining the dust with theatrical disgust. "We already have contractors lined up. This place needs a complete overhaul before we can put it on the market." "Put it on the market," I repeated, my voice rising. "You plan to sell Grandma's house." "Our house," Dad corrected. "And yes, we do. Property values in this neighborhood have skyrocketed. It would be foolish not to capitalize on the investment." "We found the perfect retirement condo in Florida," Heather added. "The proceeds from this sale will fund our new lifestyle quite nicely." She smiled, a cold expression that never reached her eyes. "We are thinking you should be out by Monday. That gives you the weekend to pack." "This is absurd," I said, my shock turning to anger. "Grandma left this house to me in her will. The will was properly executed and filed with the county. You have no claim here." Dad waved dismissively. "Wills can be contested. Decisions can be overturned. Are you prepared for a lengthy legal battle? Do you have the resources for that kind of fight?" "Because we do," Heather interjected. "Your father deserves his inheritance. Martha obviously was not thinking clearly in her final months. Who knows what kind of influence you exerted over her when she was vulnerable? The accusation stung like a slap. I took care of her. Where were you two when she needed help bathing, or when she had to be driven to chemotherapy appointments, or when she could not sleep because of the pain? Emotional outbursts will not help your case, Heather said coolly. If you refuse to vacate voluntarily, we will have no choice but to involve the authorities. Trespassing is a serious offense. Dad pulled out his phone. I have the sheriff's number right here. He is a golfing buddy. One call and he will help escort you off the premises. I took a deep breath, trying to regain my composure. Dad, I am a practicing attorney. I know the law. That document you are holding is fraudulent. Grandma's will was properly executed, witnessed, and filed. The house is legally mine. Playing lawyer now, he chuckled. This is family business, not some courtroom drama. Blood takes precedence. I am giving you 48 hours to remove your belongings before we change the locks. You cannot do that, I insisted. It would be illegal. Watch us, Heather challenged, moving toward the door. 48 hours, Amanda. Be reasonable and make this easy on yourself. We will return on Monday morning, Dad added. Have your things packed and be ready to hand over the keys. His expression softened slightly, the first hint of the father I once knew. This is just business, nothing personal. You understand that, right? Before I could respond, they were gone, the door closing firmly behind them. I stood frozen in the hallway, their threats echoing in my ears. The garden plans lay forgotten on the kitchen table, as the safe space I had called home suddenly felt vulnerable and exposed. The moment they left, my legs gave out. I sank onto Grandma's floral sofa, the one she had reupholstered twice rather than replace because they do not make them with good bones anymore. My hands would not stop shaking. Tears blurred my vision as the full weight of what had just happened crashed over me. This was not just about a house. This was about the only parent who had never abandoned me. This was about the woman who sat through every school play, who taught me to drive in the church parking lot, who helped me address law school applications at the very table my father had just dismissed as outdated junk. A memory surfaced of being 7 years old, watching my father walk down the driveway with his suitcase, not looking back once. When is Daddy coming home? I had asked Grandma repeatedly in those first weeks. Her answer was always the same. I do not know, sweetheart, but we are going to be just fine together. And we had been. I allowed myself 30 minutes to cry. 30 minutes to feel the hurt, betrayal, and fear. Then I got up, washed my face, and switched into what my colleagues called my case mode. This was now a legal matter, and I needed to approach it methodically. First, I located Grandma's will, kept in her antique secretary desk, along with other important papers. I read it carefully, confirming what I already knew. The language was clear. I bequeath my primary residence at 1423 Maple Street, including all land structures and fixed assets thereon, to my granddaughter Amanda Elizabeth Johnson. No ambiguity, no conditions. Just a straightforward inheritance from grandmother to granddaughter. Next, I examined the document my father had presented. In the light of careful scrutiny, its flaws were even more apparent. The notary stamp was from Nevada, though we lived in Pennsylvania. The dates referenced predated Grandma's decline in health, yet mentioned her diminished capacity as a reason for the transfer of ownership. Most damning, the signature was clearly forged. After years of receiving birthday cards with her distinctive handwriting, I could spot the inconsistencies immediately. I called Marcus, a colleague from my firm who specialized in estate litigation. Someone is trying to pull a fast one, he said after I described the situation. That document would not hold up for 5 minutes in court. The question is, how far are they willing to go with this charade? Over the next several hours, I dug deeper. Online county records confirmed the property transfer to me had been properly recorded after Grandma's death. The property tax statements were now in my name. Legally, I stood on solid ground. But something about my father's confidence bothered me. Why attempt something so obviously doomed to fail? I turned to social media for clues. Heather's Instagram account was a carefully curated display of luxury and status. Recent posts showed expensive restaurants, a new luxury car, and designer shopping bags. But reading between the lines revealed concerning patterns. comments about exciting new beginnings, and saying goodbye to the past. A photo of Florida real estate listings with the caption, "Hunting for Our Paradise." Most troubling, a picture posted just yesterday of champagne glasses with the text, "Celebrating soon to be homeowners again, number windfall, number blessed." They were not just hoping for the house, they were counting on it. Further digging uncovered financial troubles. Dad's business profile showed his construction company had filed for bankruptcy protection 8 months ago. Public records revealed 3 tax liens against their current property. A local business journal mentioned his company among several affected by a failed development project. They were desperate. I remembered something Grandma had told me during one of our late-night talks. "Your father came to see me alone last Christmas, asked for an advance on his inheritance to save his business. I had to tell him there would not be much money, that the house was the main asset, and it was going to you." The pieces clicked together. They knew about the will. They knew they had no legal claim. This was not about legal rights, but about intimidation. They were hoping I would be too emotional, too overwhelmed to fight back. As evening fell, texts started arriving from my father. "Just trying to be fair to everyone. We can discuss a payment plan for your belongings. Heather found a nice apartment complex that might suit your budget. Be reasonable about this, Amanda. Do not make it harder than it needs to be." Each message confirmed my suspicions. They were increasing pressure trying to wear me down before Monday. I did not respond to any of them. Instead, I called several friends from law school who now worked in relevant fields. Angela specialized in property law and confirmed my understanding of the situation. Thomas worked at the district attorney's office and explained the potential criminal implications of what my father was attempting. Sarah offered to come stay with me for moral support, which I gratefully accepted. Document everything they all advised. Record conversations if legal in your state. Keep all texts and emails. Take photos of the property regularly to prove no damage or removal of items. By midnight, I had installed a basic security camera system ordered with rush delivery. I had changed the locks and reinforced the door frames. I had gathered all important documents and made multiple copies, storing some in my office safe. I had photographed every room in the house, documenting Grandma's belongings and my own. Sleep did not come easily that night. Every creak of the old house made me start. But beneath the anxiety, something else was growing. Determination. Resolve. This house represented everything Grandma had done for me, every sacrifice she had made. I would not let anyone take it from us. Sunday passed in tense preparation. Sarah arrived with groceries and moral support, helping me organize documents and offering the kind of steadfast friendship that makes difficult times bearable. We rehearsed what I would say when my father returned, running through various scenarios and responses. "Remember," Sarah advised, while we fortified ourselves with coffee, "they are counting on emotional manipulation. Stay calm, stick to facts, and do not let them bait you into losing your temper." Monday morning arrived with ominous, dark clouds that matched my mood. At precisely 9:30 a.m., a large moving truck rumbled down the street, followed by my father's black SUV. 3 men in moving company uniforms exited the truck while Dad and Heather emerged from their vehicle. They had brought reinforcements, clearly expecting to remove possessions today. Sarah squeezed my hand. "You got this. I will be in the kitchen if you need me." I opened the door before they could knock, camera phone visibly recording in my hand. "Good morning," I said calmly. "May I help you?" Dad seemed momentarily taken aback by my composed demeanor. He had expected tears or pleading, not this professional stance. "We discussed this, Amanda. Your time is up. The movers will help pack your personal items, but everything else stays." Heather pushed forward, designer sunglasses perched on her head despite the cloudy day. "We have been more than generous with the timeline. Most people would have called the police immediately for a squatter." One of the movers shuffled uncomfortably. "Ma'am, we were told this was an approved cleanout. Is there some kind of dispute here?" "There is indeed," I replied, still recording. "Gentlemen, I am the legal owner of this property. I have documentation proving ownership. These individuals have no legal right to enter this home or remove any items." Dad's face darkened. Stop with the games, Amanda. Give the men access so they can do their job. Instead of responding to him, I addressed the movers directly. I understand you are just doing your job. However, I need to inform you that participating in an unauthorized removal of property could potentially make you accessories to criminal trespass and theft. I would be happy to show you my deed and identification to clarify the situation. The men exchanged glances. The oldest of the three stepped forward. We do not get involved in family disputes, ma'am. Perhaps we should reschedule until this matter is resolved. There is nothing to resolve, Heather snapped, her composed facade cracking. This entitled little girl is trying to steal her father's inheritance. We have documentation too. She fumbled in her purse, producing the fraudulent paper they had shown me earlier. I maintained my calm, addressing the movers again. That document is fraudulent. I am a practicing attorney with Johnson Mercer and Kline. I specialize in estate law. The property transfer to me has been properly recorded with the county. I would not want you gentlemen to risk your professional reputation or potential legal consequences based on misrepresentations. The word attorney had an immediate effect. The movers began backing toward their truck. Sorry, folks, we cannot proceed if there is an ownership dispute. You will need to contact the office to reschedule once you have this sorted out. Wait, Dad called after them, but they continued retreating. Heather turned to me, fury evident in every line of her face. You think you are so clever. Your grandmother babied you your entire life, and now you expect everyone to bow to your demands. This house should go to your father. It is his birthright. Birthright, I echoed. Still recording. Interesting choice of words for someone who abandoned his family and responsibilities. Grandma updated her will 6 months before she died of sound mind, and with proper legal counsel. She chose to leave this house to me, the person who cared for her in her final years. Dad stepped closer, lowering his voice menacingly. You have no idea who you are dealing with. I have connections in this town. I can make your life very difficult. Are you threatening me? I asked clearly, making sure the recording would capture his response, because that would be unwise given the circumstances. Listen, you ungrateful. I cut him off. No, you listen. I have been patient and professional despite your attempts at intimidation. Let me be absolutely clear about the legal reality here. I held up my phone. I have documented your threats and false claims. I have evidence of your attempted fraud. I have witness testimony about your plan to illegally seize property. Reaching into my pocket, I pulled out my bar association card and law firm identification. In case you have forgotten, I am a licensed attorney with expertise in exactly this area of law. Your fraudulent document would not survive 5 minutes of scrutiny in court. Your threats constitute harassment and potentially criminal intimidation. Their expressions changed as the reality of their situation began to sink in. Dad's confident posture deflated slightly while Heather's eyes darted between my identification and my still recording phone. Furthermore, I continued. I have already filed a report with local law enforcement, documenting your previous threats and this attempted illegal entry. If you set foot on this property again without written invitation, I will immediately pursue criminal trespass charges and a restraining order. You would not dare, Heather whispered, but uncertainty had crept into her voice. Try me, I replied evenly. Family connections do not override property law. The house is mine legally and rightfully. Any further attempts to claim otherwise will result in formal legal action against both of you. Now please leave my property immediately. For several seconds they stood frozen, the balance of power visibly shifting between us. The confident bullies who had arrived expecting easy victory were now faced with unexpected resistance backed by legal authority. Dad looked at me with an expression I could not quite read. Anger certainly, but something else too. Perhaps a grudging recognition that I was not the easily intimidated child he had abandoned decades ago. This is not over, he finally muttered, turning to leave. Actually, I called after them from a legal standpoint. It was over the moment Grandma's will was probated. Everything since has just been your denial of reality. They retreated to their SUV without further comment. As they drove away, I finally lowered my phone hands, shaking with delayed adrenaline. Sarah emerged from the kitchen and wrapped me in a hug. "You were magnificent," she said. "Absolutely magnificent." The house around us seemed to settle, as if it too could breathe easier now that the threat had temporarily receded. But we both knew this was just the first battle in what might become a longer war. The immediate aftermath of the confrontation brought a strange mixture of triumph and exhaustion. After Sarah left that evening, I found myself wandering from room to room in the empty house, touching Grandma's things as if to reassure myself they were still there. The ceramic bluebird collection she had started on her 50th birthday, the handmade quilt that had warmed 4 generations, the slightly crooked bookshelf my grandfather had built before I was born. Sleep came fitfully that night, my mind racing through scenarios and contingency plans. Part of me hoped that my firm stance had ended their campaign, but my legal experience told me that people rarely give up after a single defeat, especially when desperation drives them. My instincts proved correct. 3 days later, a courier delivered a letter from Williamson and Associates, a small law firm I recognized for handling foreclosures and debt collections. The letter, written in aggressive legalese, demanded, "I cease and desist occupancy of disputed property and surrender all keys and access within 72 hours or face legal consequences." I almost laughed at the amateurish intimidation attempt. The letter cited irrelevant statutes and made vague references to primacy of bloodline inheritance that had no basis in actual estate law. This was clearly the best legal representation my father could afford, and it confirmed my suspicions about his financial situation. I brought the letter to my own firm the next day. Marcus reviewed it during our lunch break, shaking his head with professional disdain. "This is barely one step above something written after Googling how to claim inheritance." Want me to respond? "I appreciate the offer," I told him, "but I need to handle this myself." It was not just about legal principle anymore, but personal resolution. That evening, I drafted a comprehensive response. 10 pages of meticulously cited legal precedent, attached copies of the properly executed will property transfer records, and documentation of their previous intimidation attempts. I concluded with a clear warning that any further harassment would result in a restraining order and potential criminal charges for attempted fraud. The firm's senior partner reviewed it before I sent it, adding the weight of our letterhead to my words. "This should end it," he said, "unless they are truly foolish." While waiting for the legal response to take effect, I discovered another front had opened in this battle. My phone began lighting up with messages from extended family members. Cousins I rarely spoke with, my father's sister in Arizona, even my mother's elderly aunt. "Is it true you are trying to steal your father's house?" one message read. "Your grandmother would be ashamed of," your greed claimed another. Dad had apparently been spreading his own narrative, casting himself as the victimized son whose ungrateful daughter had manipulated a dying woman to secure an inheritance. Each message stabbed at my heart, making me question how easily family could turn against each other. Rather than responding emotionally, I composed a single factual message that I sent to each concerned relative. I explained Grandma's clear wishes, my years caring for her, and the legal validity of her decisions. I attached photos of the forged document my father had presented, pointing out the obvious inconsistencies. I concluded by inviting any family member with concerns to call me directly, rather than rely on second-hand information. The responses varied. Some apologized for jumping to conclusions. Others remained silent. A few doubled down, showing how deeply my father's narrative had taken root. Family loyalty, I was learning, often had little to do with truth. As these family dynamics played out, I continued strengthening my legal position. I visited the county records office to ensure all property documents were in order. I spoke with Grandma's doctor, who confirmed her mental clarity until her final weeks, and provided a letter stating the same. I even located the witnesses to her will signing, who remembered the event clearly, and her explicit statements about wanting me to have the house. Among Grandma's papers, I discovered something I had overlooked earlier, a handwritten letter addressed to my father, dated just a month before her death. I hesitated before reading such a private communication, but given the circumstances, I needed all the information available. Dearest Richard, it began in Grandma's unmistakable handwriting. I have considered your requests regarding the house and my estate. I want you to understand that my decision comes not from lack of love for you, but from careful thought about what is best for our family legacy. Amanda has been my constant support these past years. She has shown the kind of commitment to family that embodies the values this house was built upon. While I understand your financial concerns, I cannot in good conscience leave this home to be sold off to solve temporary problems. It must remain with someone who values its history and meaning. I hope someday you will understand and respect my wishes. The letter was never sent. Perhaps she had not found the right moment, or perhaps she knew it would make no difference. But it confirmed what I had always believed: her decision was deliberate, and considered not the result of manipulation, as my father claimed. 2 weeks after sending my legal response, the situation escalated again. My father and Heather began driving by the house multiple times daily. Once I caught Heather taking photos of the property from the sidewalk. Anonymous calls came at all hours, with no one speaking when I answered. A brick crashed through the kitchen window one night, though I could not prove who threw it. The pattern of harassment was clear and documented. Each incident went into my growing file with dates, times, and photographs where possible. When the brick incident occurred, I filed a police report, immediately establishing an official record of the escalating behavior. With sufficient documentation assembled, I filed for a temporary restraining order. The legal standard required demonstrating a pattern of harassment and reasonable fear of continued disturbance. My carefully maintained records easily met this threshold. The sheriff served the restraining order papers to my father and Heather 3 days later. According to the deputy's report, Heather had become hysterical, screaming about family betrayal, while my father stood silently, his face ashen, as he realized the legal jeopardy his actions had created. That evening, my phone rang with a number I did not recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. "You have no idea what you have done," my father's voice came through, slurred and angry. "We needed that money. You have ruined everything." "Dad, you are violating the restraining order by calling me," I said as calmly as I could. "I am required to report this contact." "Report whatever you want," he spat. "Your precious grandmother never understood the real world. Neither do you. Some daughter you turned out to be." The call ended abruptly. I reported it immediately, as required by the order's terms. The brief conversation, however, painful, revealed the truth behind their desperation. It had never been about family legacy or emotional attachment to Grandma's house. It had always been about money they believed they were entitled to. The court date for the permanent restraining order was set for the following week. As I prepared my testimony and organized evidence, I felt a strange calm replacing the anxiety that had dominated recent weeks. Whatever happened in court, I had already won the most important battle. I had protected Grandma's final wishes and stood my ground against intimidation. The house around me no longer felt threatened. It was mine, not just legally, but spiritually. Every creaking floorboard and sun-faded curtain represented a legacy of love that could not be stolen by false documents or intimidation tactics. Grandma had trusted me with her most precious possession, and I had proven worthy of that trust. The county courthouse stood imposing against the morning sky, its stone steps worn by decades of anxious footsteps seeking justice. I climbed them alone, briefcase, containing organized evidence in hand professional suit armor against the confrontation to come. Inside, the polished wooden benches of courtroom 3 were mostly empty. Restraining order hearings rarely drew spectators. My father and Heather arrived minutes before the scheduled time, accompanied by a thin man carrying a battered leather portfolio. I recognized him as Jeffrey Williamson from the letterhead, looking considerably less impressive in person than his threatening correspondence had suggested. They sat on the opposite side of the aisle, studiously avoiding eye contact. "All rise," the bailiff announced as Judge Eleanor Winters entered. At 60-something, with silver hair and piercing eyes that suggested she had seen every possible human drama in her courtroom, she commanded immediate respect. The proceedings began with standard formalities. Case numbers recited, parties identified, purpose of hearing established. Judge Winters reviewed the temporary restraining order and supporting documents before addressing us directly. I have reviewed the filings in this matter, she stated, adjusting her glasses. This appears to be a family dispute that has escalated beyond reasonable boundaries. Miss Johnson, as the petitioner, please present your grounds for seeking a permanent restraining order. Standing at the podium, I presented my evidence methodically. The initial confrontation and threats, the fraudulent document they had presented, the attempted entry with movers, the repeated drive-bys and surveillance, the broken window, the harassing calls. Throughout my testimony, I maintained professional composure, presenting facts without emotional embellishment. Your Honor, the pattern demonstrates escalating harassment, following my legitimate inheritance of my grandmother's property. I have reasonable fear that without court intervention, these behaviors will continue or worsen. Judge Winters nodded, turning to my father's side. Respondents, your response to these allegations. Williamson rose, straightening his rumpled tie. Your Honor, this is simply a misunderstanding between family members during a time of grief. My client, Mr. Johnson, believed he had legitimate claim to his mother's property as her son. Any actions taken were based on this good faith belief, not intent to harass. And the fraudulent document, Judge Winters asked directly. The petitioner has provided expert analysis suggesting the deceased's signature was forged. Williamson shifted uncomfortably. My client received that document from another party who assured him of its legitimacy. He was not aware of any potential irregularities. And the brick through the window, the repeated drive-bys, the calls in violation of the temporary order, the judge's tone made clear her skepticism. We cannot confirm my client's involvement in any property damage, Williamson replied weakly. As for the other matters, emotions have run high on both sides. Judge Winters removed her glasses, fixing my father with a direct stare. Mr. Johnson, I have serious concerns about your conduct as presented here. Would you like to address the court directly? My father stood his confident facade, crumbling under official scrutiny. Your Honor, I believe I was entitled to my mother's property. I took actions based on that belief. Were you aware of your mother's will leaving the property to your daughter? Yes, but... And were you aware that forging documents to claim property is potentially criminal fraud? I did not forge anything, he insisted, voice rising. Heather found someone who said he could help with estate matters. Beside him, Heather stiffened, clearly unhappy at being implicated. Judge Winters raised an eyebrow. Mr. Johnson, regardless of who created the fraudulent document presenting it to intimidate your daughter into vacating legally owned property, shows concerning judgment. This court takes dim view of self-help measures that circumvent proper legal channels. She reviewed her notes for a moment before continuing. Based on the evidence presented, I find sufficient grounds to issue a permanent restraining order prohibiting Richard and Heather Johnson from coming within 200 yards of the petitioner's residence or place of employment. Additionally, all contact, direct or indirect, is prohibited for a period of 1 year. Turning to my father, she added, Mr. Johnson, I strongly advise you to seek proper legal counsel regarding estate matters rather than pursuing questionable methods. The court is not currently addressing potential criminal aspects of your actions, but be aware that presentation of fraudulent documents could result in separate charges. The gavel came down with finality. Order granted. Court adjourned. The tension that had held my body rigid for weeks began to dissolve. Legal victory brought validation, but also an unexpected wave of sadness. Across the aisle, my father sat with head bowed, Heather whispering furiously in his ear. Whatever financial desperation had driven them to these actions remained unresolved, but it was no longer my burden to bear. As I gathered my documents, my father suddenly approached, stopping at the distance the bailiff indicated was appropriate. Amanda, he said, voice barely audible. I never meant for this to go so far. What did you expect? I asked quietly. That I would just hand over Grandma's house because you demanded it. We lost everything, he admitted, shoulders slumped. The business, our savings, nearly the house, Heather's spending, my bad investments. I thought Mother's property would solve it all. And that justified lying, threatening me, trying to take the only home I have ever really known. I was desperate, he said simply. Now I have nothing. Heather is already talking about separation. The banks are circling, and my own daughter has a restraining order against me. For a moment I saw him clearly, not the intimidating figure who had pounded on my door, nor the abandoning father of my childhood, but a broken man facing the consequences of his choices. Pity flickered briefly, but did not override my resolve. You chose this path, I told him. Grandma gave you chances throughout your life. I would have helped if you had asked honestly instead of trying to bully and threaten me. Would you have? He asked, genuine surprise in his voice. We will never know, now will we? I replied, turning to leave. His poor choices had closed doors that honest communication might have left open. Outside on the courthouse steps, the spring air felt lighter somehow, as if the legal resolution had cleared away storm clouds. The restraining order was a shield, not a sword. It would protect me from further harassment, but could not heal the deeper wounds of family betrayal. That healing would come with time and distance. As I drove home, I passed familiar landmarks that had witnessed my childhood. The park where Grandma had pushed me on swings. The library where she had introduced me to mystery novels. The ice cream shop where we celebrated every report card. Each memory reinforced the rightness of her decision to entrust her home to someone who valued its history. Pulling into the driveway, I noticed the front garden beds I had been planning to restore before this ordeal began. Perhaps it was time to resume that project, to plant new growth in soil rich with memory, to honor Grandma's legacy not just by protecting her house, but by filling it with the same love and life she had always nurtured there. The house welcomed me back, creaking familiarly as I entered. No more looking over my shoulder. No more jumping at unexpected sounds. The legal system had worked as intended, establishing boundaries that would allow healing to begin. Whatever happened with my father now was his journey, not mine. I had a home to care for, and a life to build within its protective walls. The months following the courtroom confrontation brought a gradual transformation, both to Grandma's house and to my sense of security within it. The restraining order provided legal protection, but true peace came from reclaiming the space emotionally. Each room that had been tainted by my father's threats needed to be cleansed and renewed. I began with small changes, rearranging furniture to better suit my daily routines, repainting the kitchen in a warm yellow that reminded me of Grandma's favorite summer dress, installing bookshelves in the spare bedroom to create the home office I had always wanted. With each modification, the house became more fully mine, while still honoring its history. The most significant project was the garden. Grandma had always said you could tell the story of our family through the plants she tended. The rose bushes planted when she married Grandpa, the apple tree marking my birth, the herb garden that had supplied our kitchen for decades. Many had fallen into neglect during her illness and the subsequent turmoil. Weekends found me on my knees in the soil, pulling weeds, dividing perennials, and planting new additions. There was something profoundly healing about nurturing life in spaces where conflict had recently dominated. I planted a dogwood tree in the back corner, my own contribution to the living family history. Strange letters began arriving about 2 months after the court hearing. Collection notices, insurance queries, tax documents, all addressed to my father but delivered to Grandma's house. Apparently, creditors had identified the property as possibly connected to him. Each envelope represented another strand in the web of financial trouble he had created. I forwarded them to his last known address, without opening them, maintaining the legal boundaries while acknowledging basic human decency. Whatever his financial problems, they were not mine to solve, but neither would I deliberately impede communications that might help resolve them. Through distant family connections, I heard pieces of his continuing story. The divorce from Heather was proceeding rapidly. His construction business had officially folded. He had moved to a small apartment in a neighboring town. These updates came without emotion attached. Simple facts about someone who had become almost a stranger. 6 months after the restraining order was issued, an unexpected envelope arrived, bearing my father's handwriting. My first instinct was to return it unopened, as it technically violated the no-contact provision. But something about the plain white envelope so different from Heather's preferred cream stationery made me hesitate. After consulting with my attorney, I decided to read it, documenting the breach, but not immediately reporting it unless the contents proved threatening. Amanda, the letter began in unsteady handwriting. I know I have no right to contact you, and you have every right to report this letter to the authorities. Before you do, I hope you will read what I need to say. These months have given me time to reflect on my actions and their consequences. I lost everything, but the most significant loss was the last shred of relationship with you. The restraining order was completely justified. My behavior was inexcusable. The truth is painful to admit. I have been a failure as a father from the beginning. When your mother died, I could not handle the responsibility of raising you alone. Instead of stepping up, I ran away and left that burden to my mother. Then I resented her for being better at parenting than I was. When she left the house to you, it felt like one final confirmation of my inadequacy. Rather than accepting her wisdom, I lashed out and tried to take what was rightfully yours. There is no justification for this, only explanation. I do not expect forgiveness. I do not deserve it. I simply wanted you to know that I recognize the harm I caused, and I will respect the boundaries you have rightfully established. The house belongs to you in every sense that matters. If the day ever comes when you might consider contact again, I will be ready to listen and learn. Until then, I will honor your space and your peace. With regret and respect, Richard. No demands, no justifications, no manipulation, just simple acknowledgement and respect for boundaries. It was perhaps the most honest communication I had ever received from him. I did not respond, but neither did I report the letter. It remained in my desk drawer, a complicated artifact of a relationship that defied simple resolution. Perhaps someday it might serve as a bridge, but that day remained distant and uncertain. As the one-year mark of Grandma's passing approached, I planned a small memorial in the backyard garden. Just a few close friends, a reading of her favorite poems, and the planting of forget-me-nots around the new stone bench I had installed beneath the maple tree. She would have loved this, said Sarah, who had stood by me throughout the ordeal. Creating beauty from difficulty was her specialty. She taught me that I agreed, looking around at the transformed space. She always said gardens and people both need regular tending, firm boundaries, and plenty of patience. The wisdom of her words extended far beyond horticulture. Setting boundaries with my father had been painful but necessary for healthy growth. The house now stood as both sanctuary and symbol of the strength I had discovered within myself. In the months since the courtroom confrontation, 3 separate clients had come to our firm, with situations eerily similar to mine. Family members attempting to circumvent wills, forged documents, intimidation tactics. Each time I shared my experience as both attorney and survivor of such tactics. My personal ordeal had unexpectedly created professional expertise that helped others protect their rights. Gradually, I established new traditions within the old house. Sunday dinner with friends around Grandma's dining table, morning coffee on the porch, swing watching neighborhood children walk to school, holiday gatherings that filled every room with laughter and new memories layered atop the old. The house evolved, as did I. We both carried scars from the battles fought within these walls, but those scars became part of our character rather than defining limitations. Grandma would have understood this perfectly. She had always maintained that difficult experiences properly processed become wisdom rather than wounds. 1 year after the court hearing, the restraining order expired. No new incidents had occurred, no further contact attempted beyond that single letter. Whatever path my father was walking now, it had diverged permanently from mine. Perhaps that separation was necessary for both of us to find healing in our separate ways. The most profound lesson from this ordeal was not about property rights or legal strategies, though those had proved essential. It was about the true nature of family. Blood connections had failed me twice: first, when my father walked away from his responsibilities, and again, when he attempted to take what was rightfully mine. Yet family of choice had never wavered. Sarah bringing groceries during the crisis, colleagues offering professional support, neighbors checking in after noticing unusual cars driving by. These connections, built on mutual respect and genuine caring, proved far stronger than obligations of DNA. As I sit here now in Grandma's garden, the dogwood tree I planted, beginning to thrive, I understand what she tried to teach me throughout her life. Family is not a birthright, but a privilege earned through love, support, and respect. Houses are not merely structures, but vessels for the memories and values we cherish. And strength comes not from never facing challenges, but from facing them with integrity intact. If you have ever had to stand firm against those who should have protected you, know that you are not alone. Your boundaries are valid. Your feelings matter. The family you choose can become more meaningful than the family you were born into. And sometimes protecting what is rightfully yours becomes the first step in discovering who you truly are. What challenges have you faced with family over inheritance or property? Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with loved ones? Leave a comment below to share your experience. Do not forget to like this video and subscribe if you found my story helpful. Remember, sometimes the family that matters most is the one we build through love and respect, not just blood. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you strength in whatever battles you may be facing.